Welcome to 502 Entrepreneurs, Louisville's podcast featuring local business owners, entrepreneurs, and side hustlers, all who have a story to tell. I am your host, Carl Armijo, owner and operator of Carl Armijo Photography and Louisville Cleaning Pros. Today's guest, John Jennings, is an award-winning business and leadership coach renowned for helping organizations overcome obstacles and unlock their full potential. All right, John, thanks for joining us on 502 Entrepreneurs podcast. I appreciate you being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I know. It's always good to get to talk with a coach and, somebody who teaches others and, kind of wanted to learn more about you and your business and kind of who you work with, who you like working with the most.
Okay. So John Jennings, I'm a business and leadership coach. I work with small businesses. I work with medium-sized businesses, and on the executive leadership side, I work with people in all sorts of organizations. So I've worked with people in some large government spaces and some large companies, international companies. I mean, that space is really wide open to whoever. But yeah, so I've been doing this for 7 years and love it. I get to do, help people. Hopefully they feel good about what I'm doing with them. And at the end of the day, I feel like I've accomplished something.
Yeah. What kind of, who's your favorite client? Not like, don't you have to give me the person's name or anything, but like
Carl Armijo,
but like what type of person or what type of business is kind of the favorite one that you like to work with?
That I like people who have a growth mindset and who are trying, usually they're stuck, business owners, we get stuck in our own way, right? We don't, we're afraid to make some moves. We get, into our heads and we just don't, sometimes we just don't want it. We're afraid of what might happen or if I don't do something or when I do something, kind of like the conversation when you're talking about, opening up this place, right? So, I try to just, bring that third party neutral person, to come in and work with them to figure out what's in the way, what's in their head, what's holding them back. And sometimes it's, sometimes they literally are stuck. Maybe they've kind of capped out in a space. They can't really accomplish more with what they're doing, or they might be needing to kind of pivot in some way. And so those are always fun too, because you have to kind of really kind of get into the business a little bit, understand what's driving it, what's working, what's not working, and then figure out a new strategy and then how to implement it. So those are fun too when I get to do those types of projects.
What kind of things do you find working with your clients that they're hung up on the most? Like what's holding people back?
Yeah, I mean, 90% of it's in our head. We always say it's in that 6 inches between our ears, and, whether it's afraid to make a move, afraid not to make a move, those are just always the things that hold people back. So it's figuring out how do we mitigate the risk? If we need to mitigate the risk, is it a no-brainer? Or is it a big, roll the dice and get out there but I'm with them, either way they end up going.
Whatever. Is it easy to identify, when you're talking with them and what it is in their head that's holding them back, or do you have to do a lot of prying and digging to figure it out?
Sometimes it's glaringly obvious. But then sometimes it's really looking at their behavior style and, we do assessments and other things. And part of the reason of those assessments are to figure out where they're, what's their inner demon,
Sure. Okay.
that's holding back. So, a person is a perfectionist and they're not going to pull the trigger until they have everything lined out perfect. You have to get them, to a point where they're like, no, it'll never be perfect.
Yeah.
So if we're going to act, we're going to have to
give
act.
them a nudge.
Other people are extremely, for me, the one I always struggled with myself was being hyper vigilant, meaning, if one thing goes wrong, what's the next thing that's going to go wrong? Kind of that.
Mm-hmm.
And some business owners have that, demon in their head, and you have to plan for, what's likely to go wrong so that when it does, because things always end up going wrong at some point, you don't completely freak out over it. And you move and you kind of keep moving forward.
That's
right?
the fun part about owning a business is the ups, the downs, the problem solving of the problems and that kind of stuff.
There are endless potential speed bumps along the way when you own a business. You know that.
Yeah.
You've been doing it for years. And so you just have to always, have a plan, work the plan, and when things go awry, work through those things.
Yeah. One thing I've always been curious about with you is, you work with small businesses, kind of like me, a couple employees, but you also work with bigger corporations that have, hundreds of employees. So I imagine the problems in those two businesses are different.
Yeah.
Or the direction you're leading them is different. So what are some of the differences that you see between the small business, and the bigger corporations?
Yeah. So, I work with, on the business coaching side, I work with companies all the way up to, let's say, around 50 employees or something like that. And there's certainly a big difference in the challenges of a 2 or 3 person shop and a 50 person shop. So I've usually the larger organization, it's more working with them strategically on where they want to grow and where they need to go next. I've worked with organizations that size on like exit strategy. The owner's ready to sell, and how does he get, into the best position, put himself in the best position for that sort of thing. So when I'm doing business coaching, it does run the gamut of lots of different potential processes we're working through. On the larger organizations, I'm usually working in an executive or leadership coaching situation. So most of the time, I'm working with someone who's like a director or VP or maybe a CFO or a COO or something like that, who is trying to either they're trying to get to the next level, they're trying to position, or their leader, the CEO or whoever it is they report to, has noticed something in there that they can't quite figure out what the key is. What's the performance issue that's holding someone back.
Gotcha. So the executive coaching is more of a kind of a personal growth, career growth kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the business coaching is more of a, hey, let's think strategic and bigger picture and see what we can do here.
Yeah. So right now I'm coaching a couple of, director level people in a large global tech company. It's funny. They hired me to coach these 2 gentlemen. They're in the same title. They have essentially about the same role. One of them, coaching because he struggles with like decision making and confidence in pushing forward and pushing his team hard enough. He maybe is a little over empathetic with his team, if
Yep.
A little too caring as a boss. And then the other one is a high D, direct, he's like a 93 on the DISC scale for a D. In other words, he's very direct, very opinionated, very strong, and basically pisses everybody off. So I've got this 2 men that are in same role, they're peers, and I'm coaching
extreme
them from
ends of the
extreme opposites. So no, I don't coach them the same way. I coach them from completely different perspectives. And that's where I had 25 years of corporate leadership at 2 Fortune 500 companies, and that experience, because I was in those same shoes, right? And I crossed paths with every different type of leader, along the way. So those are fun too. It's a different type of, just like you with photography, headshots are different from real estate, right? It's a completely
different challenge.
It's the same basic concepts, but it's a very different, work environment. So that adds kind of little spice, a
little flair,
little variety to my day.
Yeah.
When I go from a small business, and then the next thing I'm meeting with an executive organization.
Do you have to dress different when you go see the executive? No.
Everybody's so casual these days. I mean,
They are. Yeah, that's true. It's
I mean, if I were coaching a VP at a law firm or something like that, I'd probably
tailor it to the industry a little bit more. Like the law firms and banks, they're still wearing suits and ties. But they're about the only ones, I think.
Yeah.
Nobody else.
Yeah. I mean, I work with several healthcare organizations. They're very casual. So no, I don't worry about it too much. This is usually the way I am.
That's it. Me too. Yeah. So you came from, the corporate background. What brought you into the coaching field from that?
Yeah.
That experience anyway.
I was, I did almost 25 years in corporate America. Did pretty well. Got into senior management, led multiple teams, had a lot of successes, but was completely burned out and sucking the life out of me kind of thing. And
a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah. And that's the reason I resonate with these people, because I've sat there. I know what you're talking about. And so I always say back in 2010, I was with Yum Brands. I got the gift of a severance package. They gave me a really nice separation agreement and really allowed me to kind of take a step back. And I decided I never wanted to go back into corporate IT. I had a lifetime there. And that was the first time I ever worked with a coach, because they part of the severance package was, having you work with a career coach. And I ended up going into an entrepreneurial company, really kind of the number 2 person at a smaller tech company. I know it wasn't terribly small. I mean, 70, 80 people, 20 million.
That's not small.
$20 million business. I mean, it wasn't tiny by any means.
Yeah, but by tech company standards,
it
is.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't IBM,
right?
But it was, and it was just so refreshing. I mean, it was a completely different environment. There was no red tape. There was, it was like
a little bit more free.
I tell the story. This is honest guy. I was there the first week, and one of the first things they said, I had a small IT team working for me, and I was responsible for some software development, some other things they were doing. And they said, we have our network here is terrible, and we outsource all that today, and we don't, they don't really know what they're doing, and it's just, it's a terrible wireless network, whatever. And I'm not a network expert, but I have friends, so I called one of my friends and said, hey, come over and take a look at this for me. Tell me, and he walked in the closet. He's like, oh my gosh. He goes, John, this is like home network gear that's, 8 years old.
Yeah. They weren't set up for what they were doing.
He's like, you need, and he basically gave me a spec sheet of, you need the Cisco gear, you need this. And so it was like 10 grand or something. And so I went over to my peer, who was the VP of administration or whatever. And I said, hey, how do I order equipment, for this network problem? She's like, you order it.
Just do it.
And I said, what do you mean? And she's like, you're the VP of IT, right? I said, yeah. And she's like, you have a solution for our problem, right? I said, yeah. She goes, order it. I'm like, how do I do that? I mean, I'm used to at Yum Brands, I had a $2 million budget. I had a $2 million budget, but I couldn't spend $10,000 if I wanted, Yeah. And she was like, oh, good Lord, give it to me. And she ordered it for me.
Yeah, no, it's a big difference. When,
it's a completely different.
That corporate environment versus something else.
Yeah.
I remember when I was in construction management, big, Fortune 500 company, engineering, project management, construction kind of stuff. And everything's a form or an approval.
Yeah.
Everything's an approval. Everything's a form.
Right.
Everything's documented. It's like there's not a lot of free flow, free form, whatever it is. And so that's a big change.
Oh yeah.
When you go from that environment to running your own business or a startup or a free form tech company like that. Cause you're always second, that doubt just comes in your head, right? Like they had these checks and balances for a reason. Yeah. We don't have them here. Like, am I supposed to be spending this money? Should I be spending this money? that kind of stuff.
But I just remember going home going, this may be fun, and I ended up working there for a number of years. That was actually one of the most fun I ever had in a job. We were mainly a government contractor, had to have a top secret clearance. We did stuff for the FBI and the Army and different groups.
That sounds fun.
Yeah. So, I've been in some interesting places in
bet.
that.
I asked Paul last time if he got to talk to aliens and do with NASA. He told me no. So what about you?
Yeah, Paul and I've had some conversations because we have some similar things in the past.
Yeah.
I've the FBI days. I've been in the Hoover Building many times and done some interesting stuff. And it's a different lifestyle too, but it was still fun. And but I got my kind of entrepreneurial legs under me there. We created some new product. We did some pretty cool stuff in healthcare. We did some pretty cool stuff in the AV world with some pretty large corporate clients and some large government clients. And so just, really, really enjoyed that period. And then went from there to a startup, like a true venture back, startup situation. A guy needed help getting his product to market. And I went to work for him. And I learned the word uncoachable at that point.
Okay, yeah.
He was one that was constantly in his own way. And we worked there for a little over a year, and it wasn't going to go anywhere. And so that's actually when I started kind of thinking about, I want to do something on my own. And so I started looking for ideas and kind of stumbled across coaching, and I worked with that career coach at 8 years earlier or whatever. I'm like, I kind of liked what they did.
I can do what they did.
This was obviously a little different, but so Focal Point is a franchise and that I connected with. I looked at several different models, really connected well with the people there. Really liked their value system and their approach, and signed up, bought a franchise, and kind of launched my business in June of 18. So 7 years ago.
7 years ago.
Yeah.
What drew you to, or what made you decide to go the franchise route versus saying, just branding yourself an executive coach or a business coach or something? Because a lot of people do that and they skip the franchise. So, what's the
part of that?
What was the driving direction?
Yeah, some of it probably was that confidence thing of do I know what I need to know? Sales was not my strength, even though I led a sales team in that company. I was talking about, I led the sales team for several years, but still, I don't know that I had the confidence for it.
Sure.
And so, what I liked is, they brought a ton of material and a kind of pretty proven model, as far as how to sell and how to position. And, the others, I'd always been part of a team,
Okay.
And,
that makes sense.
And if you hang up your own shingle, you're
on your own.
You are truly on your own, as right? You're truly on your own. And so I'm part of a team. There's some coaches that I'm, developed great friendships with all over the country. Even a couple in Europe. But those people, some of those guys, any of them. I mean, I can pick up the phone and call any of them if I'm struggling with something or have a question about something. I've got, a group of 250, 300 coaches that can, that I can tap into.
Yeah, and there's a support network.
Yeah, and there's a handful of them that are just truly have become great friends. I mean, there's one that I meet with every other Friday. We hop on a 30-minute call just to catch up and hold each other accountable for things.
Yeah.
And so, and then I coach some of the newer coaches in the system. So it's one of those systems where you kind of give back a lot too.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so they provide you, with coaching material. So you're not basically reinventing the wheel on everything, right? Too. So it's you get a little bit of a blueprint, but you get to throw your own spin on it.
Yeah.
And make it a John Jennings coaching experience instead of necessarily a focal point coaching experience. But with the backing of them and their help and
so the material that they provide, is certainly used. I use it quite a bit, but also kind of like those two guys I was talking about earlier from the same company. It's not like, oh, here is the blueprint for, coaching a person.
Right.
Because,
it's not going to work on you.
Maybe it would work perfect for one of them, but if it worked perfect for one of them, it would be a disaster for the other. So I tend to use that as a starting point. But then based on needs, we kind of pivot and go with wherever it needs to go.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Was the transition, I know you said you led a sales team, but you weren't great in sales team.
Yeah.
Or sales. But was the transition from going, from leading a sales team and, being a part of somebody else's company to now, hey, I'm doing my own thing. I got to sell. How was that transition for you? And were you able to step in seamlessly and start selling? Or did it, did you get in your own head about it and, hold yourself back a little bit?
All the above. So when I was confident in my ability to lead a team. I've always been a strong team leader type person. We had a successful sales team there that I led. I also did some individual sales, and I did some big projects. I had some sales that were like $1 million deals, $2 million deals,
Yeah.
So
that's good. It's not small.
I wasn't commissioned though. I was actually the leader of the sales team. I was salaried. So I would, if I had been commissioned, I would have probably made a lot more money. But
that's true.
but my main role was to lead the team. But there were some larger projects that I took the lead on. But when I went out on my own, I took a long time really assessing it. The startup I was working for couldn't keep me busy, so I had some time on my hands.
You're bored.
I was bored because basically every time I brought a potential client, a prospect to him, he would blow it. He would find some reason not to do it, or if I said, here's something we need to do with the product, he wouldn't do it. So, so I was bored. So I started kind of looking around and started feeling out some of my friends. And, when I kind of got this idea and kind of started taking shape, I started reaching out to people who I respected, from my years of experience. And some of them were like, yeah, John, you'll be great at that. You go. And then some were like, are you nuts? and I never forget one of my good friends who he actually worked with me at Yum, and then he worked for me at that company. And then he ended up being a client of mine. So we had a very good, unique relationship because we knew each other from every different, angle.
All the ways.
And he's like, are you nuts? And I'm like, maybe I am, but I think I really want to do this. And I remember I was talking to another buddy of mine who was wired very much like me. In fact, he was in the process of starting his own business at the time. We even talked about maybe doing something together, but he gave me some advice that it stuck with me ever since then. He said, don't ever ask for directions from someone who hasn't been where you're going.
Yeah, that's really good advice.
Yeah.
Because as humans, it's super easy to remember the guy who says, are you nuts?
Yeah.
And not the, dozen other people who were like, that's a fantastic idea. You're going to be great. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so, if you can, say, hey, he's never done it.
Yeah.
And then remember all the other positive experiences, then I think that's really good advice.
Yeah. So that guy's still a great guy. He's an executive with one of the large healthcare systems here now, and he's
doing fine.
he's doing fine. But what I do and what he does, our routes, our paths were very different.
Sure.
So you had to figure out who to listen to, and I listened. I ended up listening to people who knew me beyond just my corporate role.
Okay.
Yeah. So people who I'd say lived life with a lot more.
Yeah.
And I found those people to be very encouraging for me.
Yeah.
You know,
The people in your life you can take problems to, and
yeah,
they're going to give you an ear and listen and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was, I was worried. I mean, it was the scariest thing, you know, the biggest risk I'd really ever taken, financially, and also, quitting a job,
Yeah.
that was paying me quite well.
That's a very hard decision for anybody.
Yeah.
You know,
And so, when I did that, and I was going to try to kind of, there's another kind of funny story. I'm not going to go into all the details, but I was going to try to ease my way out, like, okay, I signed a contract with them. I'm going to, I need to go through the kind of the onboarding process, and that takes a little time, and I'm just going to keep my other job over here. And then when I'm ready to pull the trigger,
moonlight on the coaching thing.
And that lasted for about like a day and a half.
Oh, geez.
And through a weird set of circumstances that I won't go into, the guy found out that I was getting ready to do something else.
Okay.
And so suddenly I was, jumping in head first. And
well, sometimes that's what it takes. It's a life event like that. It's gonna
rip
really
the Band-Aid off and go, right?
No choice.
Yeah. So it was, that was not exactly the plan, but what's that saying? We make our plans and God laughs at us, or whatever.
Yeah.
That was,
yeah. I remember, the feelings I had when I quit my, full-time job, to go full-time into photography, and it was like you said, it was the scariest, thing you can do. You remember walking into your boss's office and kind of, having that conversation. It's tough. But I was super lucky. My wife was very supportive. I'm sure yours was too.
Oh yeah. She's
of the whole decision, and it was like, she really gave me a big push to make that happen. And so, I don't regret any of it right now.
Yeah.
I was super, I don't know, like, I guess burnt out on corporate life, I guess, is a way to say it. I wasn't enjoying it.
Yeah.
It was kind of thing.
My wife was extremely supportive. In fact, when I first heard about Focal Point, there was Greg Pestinger, who's kind of the first coach here in Louisville with Focal Point. He's the area developer, so he's trying to recruit other coaches. And he put something out called like the day in the life of a Focal Point coach or something. Mm. And I read it and went, that sounds like fun. It was like that.
I could do that, Dan.
That sounds like what I'd like. So I printed it off and took it downstairs and showed it to my wife. And she's like, well, this is you. You got to apply for this. I said, I don't think it's a job. I think this is a business. And she's like, well, can we do that? I said, I don't know, but I just emailed the guy. We're going to find out.
We're going to try.
And so that started a journey, and I talked to a lot of people and talked to a lot of other coaches in the system and that sort of thing. And then back then they had was called a Discovery Day, where went out to San Diego and met with all the C-suite of the company and some other people who were considering buying a franchise. And my wife went with me, and we spent a whole day learning and telling our stories, but them telling their stories and all that stuff. And then we got to dinner, and we walked down to the Gaslight District and had dinner with everybody. And on our way back, we kind of got separated from the group a little bit. My wife kind of pulled me over to the side, and she just said, "You've got to do this."
No, that's good. Yeah.
And so,
but that was great to hear.
That was such a relief, and she just said it with such conviction. I'm like, well, they have to offer it to me, because you're still kind of in a tryout phase at that point. And like 2 days later, the CEO called me and said, "You're in." And I'm like, okay,
we're doing it.
So it was that, but I can still remember that night that we walked back to the hotel, and she's like, "You've got to do this." I'm like,
yeah. It sounds like it was a pretty significant portion or moment in your life, kind of leads you from there to here.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then, it was just piece of cake after that,
It's super easy just to to run your own coaching business.
Quit your job and start
Find your
working.
clients.
And I found, you were asking about, kind of I landed a few clients really fast, which got me all like, oh, I'm going to be really good at this. They were all people who were friends. There were people in my network who owned businesses who said, yeah, I'll hire you,
Right.
and then, you get past that initial wave. We call that the honeymoon trap, when all your, people that can hire you, and then it's like, okay, they're done.
Right.
What's next?
Now you have to rely on your own.
Now you got to work a little
marketing,
harder. Yeah.
Your own networking.
But I had a pretty conservative business plan, which I always tell people starting their business, plan for the worst, so I had a very conservative business plan. I said, it's going to take me probably 18 months to get to, a sustainable business. And I was right on line with that. That's actually January of 2020. I felt like I had gotten there.
You were there.
And then March of 2020 happened.
Yeah.
And the whole world shut down.
March of 2020, it was like the disaster for everybody.
Yeah.
But back to your timeline. Do you think if you would have given yourself a more aggressive timeline, you would have made that deadline as well? Or do you know what I mean? I always wonder if when we give ourselves, hey, I'm going to give myself 18 months. If I gave myself 3 months, would I be there in the same time?
Yeah.
I don't know. I was just curious what your thoughts are.
Well, I do think we tend to operate to the level of our goals. So that's the downside of goal setting.
Sure.
So, there's probably an aspect of me that may have held back some things, but I think I had thought through it enough that I had just a really good plan. But also, I know that, and I see this all the time with a lot of my fellow coaches. Some have the goal of being like $1 million a year coach, and some want to be a $500,000 a year coach, and some just want to be a $50,000 a year coach or something. There's coaches that are kind of all across the spectrum, and they all tend to like if they're good, end up where their goal is.
Yeah.
I'm happy where I am. I've got a good solid business. I'm making what I made in corporate. That was my first goal was sustainability. That's
sure.
what 18
Keep the
months.
Lights on.
18 months is like I want to be able to eat and pay the bills and eat decently and feel good about myself. And then the second goal was I want to replicate my corporate. And then my third goal was I'll make $1 million.
Right.
So 18 months, I hit that sustainable goal. COVID hit for about 4 months, and my wife lost her job too. So we were like, for a few months, we were like ramen noodles and no health insurance. So we like cut every expense. We were. That
was a tough time for a lot of people.
Oh my gosh, PPP loan and EIDL loan and unemployment for her. We were doing all the things to survive, right?
Yeah.
And then my business started kind of July and August, started creeping back up. And by September, I was actually back to that sustainable level, So it was a
6 month,
5. I'd say business started coming back in July and was back to that same level by September. So not looking back now, like, oh, that wasn't that long. But boy, it felt like an eternity.
I'm sure it felt like an eternity.
It felt like an eternity then.
Yeah.
And then I pretty quickly got to my second goal, which was replicating my corporate level of income. And I've stayed there and grown from there, ever since. And so it's been, and I don't work near as hard.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, be honest. I mean, this is a secret. Don't tell any of my clients this. Exactly. This is a top secret thing. I don't work near as hard as I used to.
Well, I think that's I feel the same way, right? Like in my business, I feel like I don't work nearly as hard as I used to when I was working for somebody else.
Yeah.
But I feel like the work is different.
Oh yeah.
I think I care a little bit more probably.
100%.
I'm also, attached to my phone a lot more now than I used to be. Just, with like clients, calls, texts, just trying to like keep things rolling,
Yeah.
keep the schedule full, things like that. That's, I don't like that part as much, but
Yeah.
it's not like it's hard.
Yeah.
It's just part of daily life, I guess. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I on the way over here, I had a client text me and says, "Can we talk?" I'm like, I always know that means something's going on.
Right. Something's wrong.
And so I called her right back and we talked pretty much the whole way over here. She was just having some issues and just needed to talk to somebody about it. So yes, that some of my clients call me their business therapist.
Yeah.
And this was kind of a therapy conversation as much as anything.
But I think that's part of the reason people like you and hire you as a coach is because, they know that they can have that sort of relationship with you where they can call you up on a Friday afternoon and have a conversation that isn't necessarily related to, the coaching. Everybody tying a little bit, but what I mean.
So it was definitely business related and certainly something she was looking for some advice on how to handle a difficult situation. And she had already pretty much handled it, but just really kind of wanted to make sure that she had thought through everything. But I've had clients that called me that were almost like on the edge, like suicidal almost. I mean, that's tough.
That's tough.
And I've talked people kind of off the proverbial ledge a few times.
Right.
And that's always, I'm not a licensed therapist, and this one particular one, I knew historically about this guy. I knew he had actually attempted suicide.
Oh, wow.
Like 20 years earlier. So, you kind of start thinking, wow, this guy actually has the potential of doing something like that. Makes it even
tougher.
And I'm like, I'm not letting him off the phone until I know he's okay.
Yeah.
And we were going, I remember my wife, we were going out for dinner and I said, go on in and get a table. I'm just going to keep talking to him, because I was ready to like call suicide hotline or something. And, but we got to a good spot and we're still friends to this day. He thanks me for helping him get through a pretty tough season in his business.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, he's not a client anymore, but we talk, every 6-12 months probably.
Well, I bet that makes, doing some of that job worth it,
Yeah.
When you get people like that, they're still in your life. They still appreciate the conversations, the advice or whatever it was, that makes it worth it. Right.
Yeah. 100%. This is not like I said, I'm not a therapist always, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn or something.
I stayed at a Holiday Inn last night.
I
did like those commercials a lot.
Yeah. So it's whatever the client needs. We meet them where they are.
Yeah.
And
so, what's your favorite part right now of owning your own coaching franchise, running your own business?
Yeah.
What part do you like the best?
I like the fact that I'm impacting lives. I'm helping people succeed and helping businesses. But I'm also living, my life, my values, the things that really energize me are very much in alignment with what I'm doing. So it doesn't really feel like work, when you're able to do, good things and people are appreciative of you and, and you just get to help people.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fun.
That is a lot of fun. And it's not very common nowadays. It seems like, I know people are paying you for your help, but still like there's a lot of satisfaction and gratification that can come from helping people in different parts of their life. You're impacting their business. Somebody else might be impacting, their faith or their, home life or whatever it might be. But to be a part of that in some way is nice.
Yeah. And, it is an interesting thing that we cross in, one conversation, we're talking about their business, their P&L, or their, what's their sales look like and stuff like that. And then the next meeting, it's something, about something entirely personal.
Right.
That's going on. It's like, I thought we were going to come in here and look at your P&L again and see if it's moving in the right direction. But no, we're going to talk about, something going on in your family or whatever. So it's interesting that we just jump in. I never know what to expect when I walk into.
Yeah. Never know what's on somebody's mind.
Yeah.
What's bothering them that day or whatever.
We've been talking about AI some, offline from this, but, if I have a client that's stuck there, I've one just yesterday. Yeah. Yesterday, that's all he wanted to talk about. He's like, I'm trying to figure this out, and so I thought we were going to be talking about one thing, and
you're moving to AI.
We ended up spending an hour and a half.
I think the AI conversation is super interesting these days. It's so, I don't know what the way to say it. It's, being forced on us in a way with the way the search engines and all the apps and everybody's giving you suggestions and,
right.
This is the answer and this and that. But at the same time, when you start using it, you see the value behind it when it comes to helping you in your business. And it's like almost becomes an irreplaceable tool in your tool belt as a business owner. It's AI. So, it's like, I really like it for the most part. I don't like the way it just gets put on all the apps and things like that. Yeah. But, there's a place for that and everything as well. But ChatGPT 5 just came out, last week or this week. And have you noticed any change? I know you're a big ChatGPT guy. So I don't know if you've noticed any change from 4.0 to 5.
I haven't spent enough time in it yet to tell.
Okay.
It's been a busy week, but I have, I have used it. I use it for lots of things. And, as a coach, almost one of the first things I talk about with clients is how are you managing your time? I always say you can't manage time. All you can really do is manage your priorities. But because we're all stuck with the same amount of time. That's one thing you and I and Donald Trump and the Pope, we all have the exact, doesn't matter. We all exactly have
24 hours in a
day. You can't adjust it. But what we can do is what we prioritize and how we spend our time. And so it's always one of the first discussions I have with clients. And always, we do kind of an exercise of what's the value of your time? What's your hourly rate? And if you can hire something out, delegate something out at a cheaper rate, you should do it. You just should. And so, because you can then take that time and be doing something of greater value. Right. Well, AI is essentially free. And so if AI can take something that takes an hour and do it in 10 minutes, then that's a free 50 minutes gift you have. Or if it's a 15-minute thing, it can do it in 30 seconds. Again, that's 15 minutes, you're given. So I'm a believer in use it to the extent it can save you time. Is it perfect? Is it going to do as good a job as you do? Sometimes yes.
Sometimes better.
Sometimes better. And sometimes not. But, on my podcast, I used to spend hours listening and re-listening and coming up with the perfect description and the perfect social media post for it. And I'd spend hours and hours and hours. And then I discovered I could write a custom GPT that could take the transcript and do it in 30 seconds. Everything that I spent 3 or 4 hours doing.
3 or 4 hours, yeah.
And at first it was like, okay, I'm gonna do it, and then I'm gonna compare and all that kind of stuff. And yes, it was different, but I couldn't say it was better or worse.
Yeah, and it still works for podcast notes and social media posts and everything.
Right, and I just had to get over it. Okay, this is a good thing. So I like some of the models that you can. I'm always concerned about it putting in fake news. Coming up with its what do they call that?
Hallucinations.
The hallucinations, AI hallucinations. I'm always concerned about that. But I do use. There's some other tools like Notebook LM. Have you ever used that
I don't think
one?
I have used that one.
That one's it's a Google one. It's based off the Google AI engine. But what it does is you can upload documents, and it only uses those documents for its source.
Okay.
So it's not going out and hallucinating and making up stuff off the web. So you can load technical documents. You can load like I've done, I do like disc assessments on teams and stuff. So I have all these like assessments of say 25 team members. I can upload all those and have it. I shouldn't be telling this. It's like giving them secrets. I'm giving away some of my secret strategies, but it can go through and analyze all those and give me ideas around, where there might be conflicts on this team, where certain people might
based on their assessment.
And it's only looking at those that source of truth that you're giving it. And so I think you can load up to like 50 documents. So I've seen people use it for like really technical things. One client was had a lot of warehousing and manufacturing and inventory type stuff, and they uploaded a whole bunch of things and then had it do some analysis of it.
I could see a good use of that.
So it's really cool how you can use it in some ways. And it, like I said, it's keeping it, it's not going out and pulling in other facts. It's just using the source that you provide it.
I can see that very like that. My mind went to like my project management times, on a construction project where you got this, big document of specifications that you got to follow, and you plug that in, and then you can search it, and it can give you the answer right from your document in no time. It seems like that'd be super helpful.
Yeah. Now, if you really want to freak out and play with it, you can load all this stuff up, and then it can generate a two-person podcast conversation telling about what you wanted. So you can say, hey, talk about the makeup of this team and describe it. And it's like a male and female. They got perfect radio voices, and they basically will put together what sounds like a very professional script.
Yeah,
they do mispronounce words every now and then, but
it's only getting better though. Every day. The mispronounced words that we have today aren't going to be there 6 months from now. Or, that kind of stuff. What other tools or AI tools are you using in your business? To me, the best part about AI is learning how other people are using it.
Yeah.
Because there's always something that you can take from the way other business owners are using it to help, in your business.
I do a lot of content. I do a lot of presentations. I do workshops, training programs, and I use it to help me bring my thoughts together. So I'm working on a program right now, and I just use the voice to text on my phone so I could just basically talk. And I said, here's what I'm thinking about. We're putting on this program to do this. Here's some of the things I'm wanting to do. And I basically just talked.
Outline your program into ChatGPT.
Yeah, outline my program in 10 minutes of rambling, and then I said, okay, help me pull all that together into like a structure, give me an outline for this. And it's amazing how close it is.
Yeah.
Now I don't let it generate slides for me and stuff like that. I think it's not that great at that stuff, but just to take 10 minutes of rambling and turn it into a nice cohesive structure. I could have done that, but it would take me hours, cause I'm a good creative person. My wife is always like, why are you using that? She's kind of a little bit of
she's an AI hater.
Just technology in general. She just is always skeptical. And I'm like, it's just, I could have spent half a day tomorrow, outlining that and coming up with something probably just as good. But now I've got 4 hours of my day back tomorrow, so I can go play golf. Right?
Yeah.
So I use it to help get my thoughts together a lot. But
do you ever find yourself just driving in the car and then talking to ChatGPT while you're driving?
I've done that. Yeah. It's not, I always make sure start it at
Yeah.
when I'm stopped somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't,
You can put ChatGPT on Bluetooth and you can just talk right to it. And
you know,
it's
they need to make it a little easier for that. Like what is the iPhone application on the car? They need to add ChatGPT as one of the default applications.
They
Then
probably
you can
will when the new iPhone comes out, because I hear they got some kind of deal going with OpenAI now.
Yeah, so. And you know, I've played with a lot of the major tools, you know, Claude and Copilot, and you know, they're all good. I mean, I don't have, you know, I just was one of like I was in that first million or whatever on ChatGPT,
right.
and I just
you're waiting for it.
I've kind of like stuck with it now at this point. I've done so much with it, but
for $20 a month, you really can't go wrong.
Yeah.
So I think it's great for that kind of stuff. I was going to ask about your clients that use AI. What's the best use you've seen one of your clients and how they're using AI to improve their business or save them time?
I mean, some just in general, just using it for just like me with content and stuff like that. I had a client that about a year ago, she's CFO of a healthcare company, and they had this weird situation where a respected team member was asking, well, here's the story. She had a wreck out leaving the parking lot, but on the road, right? She had pulled out of the parking lot, had somebody T-boned her or something on the road, and she wanted the company to cover her damage.
Right.
And sorry, you're on the road. Even if you're just like your wheels just left the parking lot pavement, you're on the public highway at that point. And she was kind of being adamant. They had talked to their attorneys and they had talked to their insurance, and everybody agreed, like, no, this is her responsibility. Sorry. Yeah. And so, but she had been with the company for like 20 years, and they didn't want to, you know, make her mad or whatever.
Right.
And so she had been struggling. My client had been struggling with how to write this letter, and she had spent hours on it and was not happy with it. And I had talked to her earlier, previously about AI, and she's like, oh, I you know, she was definitely scared of it. This is about a year ago. And I said, well, let's just try it. And so, you know, we were on Zoom, so we were sharing screen, and I basically kind of described the situation, made sure she agreed with it, and it produced a incredibly accurate and well thought out letter. It was too long, you know, and I said, so I said, I condense it, you know, by a third or something, you know, and it came back perfect. And so I said, you know, here's what I want you to do. Take this. I'm going to send it to you. I said, read it and put it in your own words, you know, don't just, don't just copy and paste, but, you know, use your vernacular and that sort of thing. So she did. And the person, you know, accepted it. You know, it actually was, and that was all it took.
Right.
And so she's now become like a complete AI fanatic. I mean, she uses it for everything. You know, in fact, she told me this week, she said, we needed to have an AI policy of because we're in healthcare and HIPAA information and stuff like that. She goes, we realize a lot of people are using tools. Some of them aren't secure. And so she goes, I used ChatGPT to create the policy. And part of the policy was you can't use ChatGPT. So I thought that was hilarious. But but they're using it for a lot of stuff. They're now starting to do brought in a piece of software that like analyzes PDF invoices and automatically categorizes everything for it, you know, and saves.
Oh man, saves a lot of time.
Basically, a full-time person,
right?
Like going down to like an hour a day, you know, just cleaning up versus, you know, so you know, stuff like that is cool. I mentioned the one doing the inventory analysis and stuff like that. That's pretty neat. I mean, I don't really care what you're doing with it, as long as you're doing something that's saving you some time and giving you some creative energy back, you know?
Yep.
And that's what I'm always encouraging people to do.
Yeah. I mean, getting your time back is, I mean, it's the myth or the unicorn that we're all chasing as business owners, right? That's,
yeah.
A lot of times that's why we start our own business, because we think we're going to get some
Yeah.
more freedom, more flexibility, more time back. We find out it's not exactly true 100% of the time.
Well, I tell you that, yeah,
unless you're
that
in
first
business.
18 months, I did not get any time back.
Yeah.
It wasn't until after COVID.
It comes later, but the more things you can use or tools you can find that save that time, then that dream that you dreamed, or dreamt when you started your business is more and more likely to come true.
Yeah. 100%.
Yep.
So.
And if you're a bigger organization, you're just going to be saving money. Time is money.
But even nobody likes doing mundane work.
No.
And so the more you can take the mundane work that you, whether you're in a bank, whether you're in a insurance company, whatever, there's lots of just paperwork and just, stuff that you have to do. Healthcare, I'm thinking all these
everything.
heavily regulated industries, and nobody likes doing that stuff. Maybe a small percentage of people do. Maybe 10 to 20% of people do, but most people like to have some variety and be doing things that are productive and stuff like that. So the more AI can take some of that mundane work off our plate, I think everybody's going to be happier.
I think people will be able to be more creative.
And,
enjoy things that they're doing more. Yeah, I think so too. I think everybody's going to be way happier from that.
Yeah. So I'm optimistic about that aspect with AI. If people have the opportunity now to do things that have a little more meaningful, and who wouldn't want to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So moving away from AI just a little bit here, if you've got somebody listening right now and they're thinking, man, how do I know if I need to hire a coach? What are some of the signs?
Well, one of the standard statements we always say is everybody needs a coach. I mean, think about pro athletes. Tiger Woods at the peak of his game still had a coach. Every baseball player, every basketball player. Not only do they have their team coach, but they also most of the successful ones have their individual practice coach.
Right.
So that's one of the answers we always give is everybody needs a coach. I have a coach. I mean, I have a couple of coaches. I mentioned the one guy that we get together every other week. That's a form of coaching, co-mentoring, whatever you want to call it. But we hold each other accountable and that sort of thing. So in reality, we can all benefit from someone like that. The people I'm looking for typically are people who are stuck in some way. They're either stuck in their business, they're not growing at the speed they want to grow. Maybe they had growth and then leveled off. I remember one of my very first big clients was a huge manufacturing company. I had no experience in the industry, but I knew the CEO. We happened to have a conversation, and he said, "You know what? We've grown every year for 30 years until this year." Mm-hmm. He goes, "And we're still doing great." He goes, "We're very profitable and got a great business, but this is the first year in 30 years that we haven't grown. I think we need to hire you." and we worked together we worked up till COVID together, and we did about a 20% growth in that year we worked together.
That's good.
Yeah. And they had many zeros. So it was
right.
it was a significant amount of money. But I also worked with smaller businesses that, another one of my first clients, actually my very first client, had never broke $1 million. And he had been in business for 20 years. He just had this cap that he couldn't seem to get past. And we did like 1.3 the next year, and then like 2.2 the year after that. And, he just kind of needed to get out of his way and make some decisions and make some things happen.
Right.
And I love working with people who are stuck, whatever that particular reason might be. And those two situations were completely different. but both of them, we developed some great growth strategies. And then, on the the executive coaching side, leadership coaching side, it's the same way. You might feel like, gosh, I've made it to this level, but something's holding me back from that next level. I've worked with work with a COO who the CEO brought me in to work with her because she was his, heir apparent,
right?
And he didn't feel she was ready. And so I worked with her for about 18 months before he retired. And now she's the CEO of that organization. So it can be, they all have that kind of common thing. What I don't like to work with, and not saying I won't talk to anybody, but that person is like, oh, my business is dying. Help me. I'm 3 months from bankruptcy.
Right.
That's usually, it's like,
it's hard to save at that point.
Yeah. Those are not the most fun situations. I much prefer someone who has a great business who, wants to be better.
Right.
We always say, if someone has a good bike, they just need a little better rider.
There you go.
They need to just get on it and push ahead.
Very good. So, hey, John, so if anyone out there wants to find you, where do they go? Where's the best place to get a hold of you online?
Yeah.
Paul gave me his phone number. I would recommend that, but.
Oh, no, I'm fine. My phone number is published everywhere.
I know, yeah.
It's rung about 5 times while we've been talking. So I'm used to it. But my phone number is 502-724-0430. On social media, LinkedIn is the most common one. I mean, I'm on Facebook and others, but LinkedIn's the most, for professional people. That's usually kind of where we go. And then my website, I'll just say johnkjennings.com will forward it to my website.
Perfect.
That's easier than, long domain names. So,
right. Exactly.
So johnkjennings.com is the easiest way. And all my contact stuff is on there too. So, and I've got free assessments and things like if you want to do, there's a leadership assessment, there's a exit readiness assessment. If you're thinking about selling your business, there's a business assessment that just kind of, you answer some questions and it'll come back and say, here's, maybe it's on the strategic side, or maybe it's on, you don't have a good marketing plan, you don't have a good sales process, whatever. So those are all free assessments that are out there on my website.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, John, I really appreciate you being here today.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, had a great conversation. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you for having me for sure.